Richard actually 11 minutes, and not the 15 that you are entitled to. I will give the floor to questions and remarks, maybe just to add to what you said, because you mentioned the effects of climate change on economy, drought, floods, food prices. I would like to add the effect on displacements, forced displacement, and also that some of these situations provoked by greenhouse gas emissions are also giving rise to conflicts and forced displacement. In the measures that maybe we should all adopt, we should take into account that maybe in the years to come there will be more and more possibly displaced persons because of climate change. If there are any questions, je donne la parole à celui qui veut la prendre, poser des questions à Richard, faire des commentaires. Oui, Wanja.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Very interesting, and glad that really UNEP is really looking at critical data in. My name is Wanja, WFP World Food Program. Glad to see that UNEP is really keeping a close eye on environmental issues in the country. And also supporting the government, I think, in the preparations for the COP27. That said, there are very many opportunities, in Cameroon, extremely many opportunities, and I think with working with the UNEP, I think we could leverage some of these activities that you've mentioned and opportunities. But I just wanted to hear from you, sir, how can we, as the UNCT and critical agencies, particularly, all of us working in Resource Group 4, which is really on environment and issues around climate change, how can we leverage some of the resources that are available to impact in adaptation, mitigation, in the areas of climate change? We know we have the Green Climate Fund, the Global Environment Fund, the climate adaptation. How, I'm sure you already know that the emergencies and the operations in Cameroon, most of them are really poorly funded. And if we don't leverage some of these resources that come through the hands of government to support government efforts, really, it's going to be very, very difficult to implement some of these activities. So that was my question, but I think it's important that we get the support of UNEP to really start leveraging some of these global pockets of resources. Back to you.
Totally agree. Green funding. Quelqu'un a une question? Observation, commentaire? Oui.
Merci. Thank you for the presentation. I'm wondering, at UNESCO, we are on the side of many of these policies, but through professional training or access to finance for activity generating, we can touch upon agricultural choice. I'm not always sure that the choice we support through training or through inclusive finance are really aligned with the global strategy of agricultural transformation, sustainable, etc. So how can we make sure that we are part of a common kind of UN direction in encouraging, this substitute, alternate, etc. Because I think we will need some guidance on that. Thank you.
Just kindly repeat the question. I didn't hear you very well. I think if you could help repeat, I will appreciate it.
Can you hear me better?
Yes, please.
Yes. I was asking that even UN agencies who don't have a mandate on environment or agriculture can touch upon, some specific actions. For example, for UNESCO, it's training or it's finance for revenue generation, etc. And we encourage agricultural choices through that. And I'm not sure we always know which kind of agriculture we encourage, and if this is aligned with, what we, I would say, as UN or international community is there. So could you have something about that, please? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I will. There are also colleagues who are connected online with questions. So I will give the floor, and then we will go back to you because we have not many questions. I will give the floor to Abdel, and then Raymond, Alassane, and Arlette. And then we will close. Bon. It's a very interesting topic. Should we? Maybe then what we will do, maybe I will give the floor to Abdel and Raymond. Richard will respond, and then we give the floor to Alassane, Emine, and Arlette, and then we close.
Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you. You made me think about my lunch. Now, with all I heard about cassava and sweet potatoes and etc. Thanks very much. And no, on a more serious note, I just wanted to maybe ask where are you standing on the debate or the conversation with the international finance institutions, when it comes to the World Bank, the IMF, and etc. Because what you highlighted is also related to the macroeconomics. And for instance, I know that in Cameroon, many of these agencies and institutions are engaged in efforts to support Cameroon for instance, diversify, find alternatives to the products, reduce the numbers in terms of importation, but try to develop products internally, etc. So I wonder what is the state of play when it comes to a dialogue with these institutions? My second point is that we are working with Olivier and also the RC to launch the UN Network on Migration around mid-October. I would be super interested in having UNEP, although not physically present in the country, to also be part of it, because at the end of the day, it could be a platform to benefit from your technical knowledge and advice as of how we can mainstream all these aspects into mobility questions. Thanks.
Raymond?
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. If you can hear me loud and clear. Okay. So thank you. Very, very interesting topic. I'm Raymond. I'm the UNIDO representative, and I'm also the chair of the Reserve Group number 4 for the UNS this year. Thank you for that brilliant presentation. And we all know, and also we are really commending the good efforts you're doing on the international dialogues, and also on what you just mentioned on innovative financing. But for your presentation, I was expecting more on different other aspects, because what you present have been presented by UNDP, UNIDO, another also UN agency. Maybe you have now the occasion to tell us more about policy and regulations, and about also changing business model. We are talking about circularity, and maybe you have other models. And also on the third point, maybe you can give us more clarity on what you are doing, what you are also promoting in terms of education, in terms of research, for a kind of awareness on these issues regarding climate change, for prevention, but also for adaptation. Thank you.
Thank you. So maybe, Richard, you can already start responding to these questions, and then there will be another round with Alassane, Emile, and Arlette, and RC at Manuel, Davis Ward as well. Richard, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Olivier, and thanks, colleagues. I mean, this is quite very exciting. I wish we had the whole day to have a conversation on this, but unfortunately, we just had a few minutes. But I will do justice to provide perspective to the points that colleagues have raised. To Wanja, thank you, Wanja. Yes, I think when I was in Cameroon and I visited the UN office there, and I think Sophie, I met Olivier. The discussion around financing came up, and I think it's a very big issue. The reality is that leveraging resources collectively is the best way to go, but the reality is also that these resources don't come immediately, but the challenges that we face, especially under the changing climate, do not wait for those resources. JEF processes take time. GCF processes take more time. So what we have been doing from the UNEP perspective, because UNEP have got what is called the Finance Initiative, supporting countries and also supporting the private sector and private banks to develop risk-sharing facilities. Why am I bringing this perspective? That we will never have enough money with the speed in which we need. But the little resources we have, we can use them to incentivize private sector to lend. For example, working with these cooperatives that I mentioned, which are in every community, especially in Cameroon, where I happen to come from there and I know a bit about it, whether it's in Yangis or Town Things. If they can actually develop a facility, if you get about 100, 200,000 US dollars and you were to work with these financial institutions to develop these facilities so that if they lend it out, money out, and there is a default, that risk instrument can cover it, you actually end up having more actions carried out and more people having opportunity in terms of credit to do that. And that is not necessarily something that is in the mainstream of our UN development work. And that is the direction in which we're moving. Of course, I still strongly believe that with the results go forward and having all the actors there, we can leverage the window of JEF, for example, or of GCF. And I think this is a discussion we can take further to look at the mechanics of how that can be done at the moment. And we can bring in the support from the institutional perspective here. So the question from a colleague from UNESCO, excellent question. The reality is that the educational perspective, or from a development perspective, to the have to have environment, and you talked, I think your question was, which kind of agriculture is acceptable? The reality is, if you look at 54% of emissions are land-based. And you look at the case of Cameroon, I am sure about over 65 to 70, 80% of the entire population of the workforce in the agro sector. And they focus mostly on subsistence farming. What, from the UN environment perspective, we've been pushing of nature-based solutions, ecosystem-based adaptation, working with nature, not against nature, but not limiting our efforts there, because if you produce and you cannot add value, then that means nothing, because then you lose in terms of post-harvest losses. And so we're trying to use an approach called mitigation powering adaptation. So if you use nature-based solutions and you're then able to add value either through a solar dryer or using a solar-powered cool system, then you will be able to then actually expand not just the value chain, but at the same time make savings. So any action that is actually environmentally based is so. But to answer your question broadly, is that the jobs for young people, so through the framework of education, will come through the environment, and will come through leveraging climate action solutions. So teaching them nature-based solutions, climate-smart agricultural approaches, but from the perspective of adding value, could be an area in which they can start to develop entrepreneurial skills there that they can tap opportunities. Then on the question on international finance solutions, World Bank, the state of play. The reality is, and I like that question on state of play, the macro-micro disconnect sometimes look very highly visible. And I think I'll answer this from the perspective of the first question from Wanja, which is the big money and investments are important, but the bottom needs to meet the top. And that gap in which we call it a ladder connecting the bottom to the top. These resources should actually, I think there needs to be that kind of championing. And I think from a UN perspective, how do we work with the World Bank, work with the IMF, so that at least they start to invest in these micro financing institutions and even cooperatives in form of de-risking, so that resources are not only invested only in roots or only in big energy projects alone, but also making sure that part of it can actually get down to these local communities through these structures. Then on the question on migration, very, very important. We're happy. We've done some work in Somalia on migration, and through the lens of leveraging environment to be able to develop tools that can actually be able to help displaced people, not only engage in environmental activities, whether it is briquette making or it's biogas making, but also have a tool that can actually be able to help ensure environmental sustainability. We've done this in northern Nigeria as well. So we'll be happy to bring that expertise on board to work with you guys on this perspective. And Raymond, yes, thanks. I couldn't have given the perspective of UNEP in 10 minutes and at the same time cover the topical issue. So let me put it this way. I hope in 3 minutes I can be able to do this. The perspective I brought was a granular way in which we can be able to relate. But the UNEP's work, especially in the climate change arena, is threefold. First, from the science perspective, UNEP produces the emissions gap report, which actually every year have become a flagship report to showcase where the world is heading in terms of emissions. And the one for this year will be released next month. And then it also produces adaptation report. So that's from the science perspective. Where are we as a world heading? Where are we as a continent heading? And there's also the Africa Adaptation Gap report. That said, then there is the policy dimension. And what I was giving, especially from the perspective of finance, the incentives that countries put in place sometimes incentivize usage of actions that work against the environment. Let me take the example of the subsidies that are given for fossil fuels. And I think in the case of Cameroon, the data that I had was, I think Cameroon released, was it almost about 1 trillion CFA? 1 trillion, and that was to subsidize fossil fuels. How about that get injected into clean solutions? So we're helping countries to divest from fossil fuel subsidies and inject those into renewables, and at the same time also ensure that at least that the integration of these clean energy solutions into school curriculum. And we've done this with schools in Nigeria, in Botswana, so that at least the entrepreneurial dimension can actually be portrayed. And then on the last aspect, which you asked, what we are doing with circularity, a very interesting aspect. I think I brought that up in a very nitty-gritty way, where I'm talking about waste to briquettes, where young people can actually be able to develop their skills around that area. Waste to biogas, at that nitty-gritty perspective. But from a policy perspective, I'm glad to bring to your attention that in March this year, the UN Environment Assembly adopted a resolution to actually ban plastic. And currently there is a negotiating framework under what is called Internationally Negotiated Committee that in the next 3 years, the world will have a legally binding instrument that every country will have to align to. And that then will create an enabling environment, not only for businesses that will then disincentivize plastics, but at the same time will create an opportunity for circularity to become the norm and to become the economy of now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Richard. We give the floor now to Alassane, Emin, and Arlette. Back to you, Richard. But please, can you respond in a more concise way, because we are looking also at the time. So, Alassane, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Just to give you some perspective from UNDP side. In Cameroon, we work closely with over UN Agency for Integration of Climate Change Challenge in the implementation of National Development Strategy. From UNDP side, with your new country program document, we want to support government for developing national climate policy to address climate change challenges. We work also for adopting national climate financing that you talked previously. I think that it will be better to work closely together to reinforce capacity of UN agency in Cameroon in climate finance, probably to develop strategy to address challenges in this area. We also support population for and also at local and national level for preparation of disaster risk management plan. I think that it's very important to address challenges to prevent and also to address challenging regarding disaster risk situation. We also support, for example, for the COP preparation, government for the elaboration of national determined contribution of Cameroon. I think that it will be better to work together with UNEP and to address some of the challenges and also to develop capacity of UN country team. For example, in climate financing and also disaster risk management plan, and probably for implementation, formulation and implementation of climate policy. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. I think thanks for those updates. So Olivier, this one is second. Just to acknowledge is enough, and of course we have to work together, and this is really a very core aspect for us to leverage the UN country team to deliver the different perspective of our work. Over.
So, Emin, Arlette, and then back to Richard.
Okay, merci beaucoup, Chair. Thank you so much, Richard, for your presentation. Really informative. I'm Emin from IFAD, representative for Cameroon, the Central Africa region. So I was just interested by the way you were concise and at the same time giving us a lot of figures, you know, and linking the macroeconomic analysis and the sectors that matter. You mentioned agri sector, adaptation mechanism, protection of environment and biodiversity. I think those are things every investor in Cameroon should be looking at as we invest responsibly. So I'm talking on behalf of IFAD as a UN agency, but also as an IFAD. You might know that every investment comes, or we are required to do an environmental, social, and climate management framework analysis. Same as other IFIs, I know they do the same. So there is no excuse of investing responsibly without looking at the adaptation mechanism throughout the value chain we are supporting. So the colleagues also mentioned the aspect of financing. IFAD is working closely to mobilize financing for climate. We are leading in many financing for climate, being with the GCF Adaptation Fund and others. What I see a request from UNEP actually, and all of us, is that we really continue doing this policy dialogue in the country. When I visit the ministry, I don't feel like they have the information or the insight how they should mobilize more. They have potential, but they are not mobilizing more financing for this sector. You mentioned the aspect of risk sharing, insurance. You forgot insurance, and yet it is really attacking the environment and what we are building on this earth. Is being affected by climate change. So the insurance and any other package that would come to relieve the farmers or the investors on the ground. I think all what you said is really what we are, most of the institutions are doing, building the private sector, cooperatives, but ensuring any infrastructure is climate resilient is what is being done at country level. So I just wanted to encourage you, all of us. I know there are some partners here that we are thinking of putting in place a policy unit, a kind of sharing policy ideas. You know, it will be good that we do this regularly. Over. Merci beaucoup.
Yeah, merci beaucoup, Amin. Thank you very much. I mean, that is wonderful. You mentioned insurance. Actually, I think, that just didn't come to my mind. But actually, we're developing a blended finance facility that can help countries leverage it. And insurance is actually a very core component. But insurance, even beyond what we think, but actually getting down to the common person at the grassroots, if he produces and loses, can he be covered with insurance when it comes to volatility moments like what is happening with the inflation at the moment that people cannot be able even to market or even to sell. So that's a very good point, and I love the aspect of the policy unit that we can continuously share this. Thank you very much. We will definitely have to work together, and this is a very beautiful opportunity. Over.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. My name is Arlette Bongo, and officer in charge for UN Women. So having said UN Women, you know already where I'm going. And for me, I am interested in the gender analysis of all the things that you have presented in terms of the gender gaps, the gender challenges, but also the gender response. If we take the agricultural sector, we know that women are really at the heart of this, and they are facing a lot of challenges. And how could we do, at operational and policy level to reduce the shock? At UN Women, we have a very big and regional program. We call it Climate Resilient Agriculture. And I think we need to engage really bilaterally to see if our different intervention, either at the national level or policy levels, we have at the same level of standards, and so that you can guide us. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Very, very core. I mean, the reality is this. You cannot be able to build climate resilience in Africa without actually investing in women. And what we have been doing through the work, I think we can bring this knowledge, is every work that we do, there is a very strong component of gender disaggregation. And what we've been doing, especially with the aspect of decentralizing coal systems and solar dryers, we have produced reports showcasing that even in picking up those climate actions, when women are actually engaged, they become actually the pioneers of that, and scalability becomes quite very, very easy. And so that dimension, it's an aspect that we're dealing very strongly with. And of course, we would like to work together to take those lessons we've gathered across the continent to bring to the perspective of Cameroon. And the Tonkins and the Njangis, I actually believe there's another dimension that if you really also want to have accessibility of resources, because most of the time, okay, they talk trillions, yeah, when they reach at the national level, sometimes even at the bottom, they don't reach them. How can we use that to also do so? So it's a great opportunity. Thank you for bringing that perspective. Omar.
Thank you, Richard, for this excellent presentation and taking the time to respond to all of us. I think that many of us have already developed strategies for climate action, but are we putting them together? I think that UNEP is the best place to help us putting all of these things together with the RC office. I will give back the floor to Atman, who might also have his own observations or questions. Over to you.
Merci beaucoup, Richard, pour cette présentation. Mon nom est Atman Mravili, je suis le représentant de la FAO, mais j'assure l'intérim de... Permettez-moi de dire deux, trois choses que vous avez parlé, parce que vous avez beaucoup parlé d'agriculture, et je crois connaître un point là-dessus. D'abord, are you comfortable with French, by the way? Sorry.
Yeah, you can proceed, but I'll respond in English.
No, you can never respond in Kiswahili if you wish. Wanda will translate.
Maybe even Olivier can translate.
Absolutely. That will translate. Oh, yes, sorry. I was saying thank you very much for your presentation. It was very comprehensive, and I think it's very very refreshing and very interesting to have such kind of out-of-box presentation during our institute meeting. Many of our sessions are very formatted and following, the agenda of the NSDGs and so on. But having a few minutes to think out of the box and to see the global challenges is a very, very good kind of practice. I wish really to praise that. And thank you so much. I'm just a little bit concerned over data and the way we are collecting them. I think it's better with the bakery businessman. It is not really so profitable to produce without changing some rules, some policy, and some fiscal measures. So it is not really that. Secondly, we need other investments to be able to compete with the importation of wheat. Okay, so I think it will be good for the next version of your presentation to share with agencies like the World Food Program, IFAD, from NEMA, ourselves, and FAO, and to have other alternative data, cross the data, and make sure that we are talking, we are focusing on the same, we have a common view from the UN perspective. But again, thank you very much for that, and we look forward to see a new version and updated version of your PowerPoint. But you still have 1 minute if you wish to react on my suggestion. Over to you, Richard.
Yeah, thank you very much for that perspective. And first of all, data for us is quite very, very important. And data is it moves based on also the analyses that are happening. We have the World Environment Situation Room here, and we pick data from that as well. But at the same time, the data on cassava that I brought, it was also juxtaposed with the reality of the work we are doing on cassava across 5 countries in the continent, which is, for example, we're doing work in Uganda, we're doing work in Nigeria, and the situation of Cameroon using the data that I presented. When we juxtapose that, the case and the biggest point that was being made there is that cassava is a climate resilient crop. And the data we have on cassava and we have on wheat is going to reduce by 36% under the current changing climate. And if you are to look at cassava, which is a climate resilient crop, and compare with wheat, which is going to reduce, and then it will mean that the demand for it is going to be quite very high, the prices are going to go up. Those are facts. The second aspect that was being driven there was the dimension of policy. We've supported Uganda, they're developing a cassava rate policy at the moment. Can we be able to bring that dimension so that discussion can start to happen in Cameroon using those lessons from Uganda and also from Nigeria, where we have that lesson learned? So data very important, but the bigger perspective of how policy can be formulated from that is very, very key. The reality is that the offtake of cassava in Cameroon or sweet potatoes, I mean, these are available, but that is not enough. How do we make sure that the cassava also pass the standards in terms of the quality that is needed? That brings a different dimension of working with the Bureau of Standard of the country, which we can bring experience from that. So those are the dimensions, and I think what I was trying to do was 3 things: breaking lessons, using the little data that we've gotten from Cameroon, but at the same time putting within the perspective of the knowledge that we've gotten across the continent. Over, but that's noted.
Merci beaucoup, Richard. Et vraiment, on vous remercie pour le temps que vous avez pris à faire cette présentation et à répondre aux questions.